Hello everyone, I hope you can hear me clearly. Welcome to the latest IES webinar. This one is presented by Professor Carolyn Roberts, entitled I've been exploring this great idea, funding for innovative and applied environmental science. So just a little bit of background about our speaker. Carolyn is Vice President of the institution and co-editor of the latest thematic edition of the IES Journal on novel materials and the circular economy. Carolyn is Director of the Environmental Sustainability Knowledge Transfer Network, also known as the ESKTN, based at the University of Oxford. The ESKTN is part of the UK government-funded agency, the Technology Strategy Board, that links businesses to universities to catalyse innovation in environmental technologies. So at the end of the presentation, there'll be a short Q&A session with Carolyn. You can either submit your questions in the chat box, which you should be able to see on the GoToWebinar launcher to the right of the page. If you can't find that, then please do email us questions. You can send those to the generic IES email, which is info@the-ies.org. You can find that on our website. So if I'll hand over to Carolyn now.
Thanks very much, Ruth. Okay, so we get underway. Welcome everybody. It's interesting to do a webinar from London. I'm sitting in the IES office looking out the window at quite a surreal landscape actually of skyscrapers and a bit of vegetation. We're going to look this morning at funding for innovative and applied environmental science, and I'm going to concentrate particularly on the funding that's available from Innovate UK, which is the new name for the Technology Strategy Board to which Ruth referred earlier. But first of all, let me do a little bit of a background about Innovate UK. Innovate UK is the government innovation agency, and it has three really significant objectives, and they are shared, as the header along the top of the slide suggests. They're really shared with Horizon 2020, which is the European funding programme. So the three aims, really overarching aims of Innovate UK, are about excellent science, about developing competitive industries, and about generating a better society. Now, I want to emphasise all three of these equally, really, because the excellent science, as we know from the perspective of environmental science, and applied environmental science in particular, excellent science is something we're very good at in the UK. We appear nearly at the top of the international rankings for science. There's also, looking at the right-hand side of the diagram, there's also a lot of interest from the environmental science community and environmental scientists working in areas not necessarily just of natural science, but also of social science and beyond. There's also a lot of interest in generating a better society as well. So that's the two outside images on this slide. However, Innovate UK traditionally has been focusing on developing more competitive industries. And that's important when you come to think about the funding that's available from Innovate UK, because it has principal objectives concerned with generating and capturing the value from the excellent science that we have in this country. So you see there, it's talking about strategy, ideas, and then developing and innovating on the back of those to capture benefit for the UK. And that benefit could be financial, it could be in terms of a better society as well. So the goal for Innovate UK is, as it says on the slide now, to accelerate economic growth by stimulating and supporting business-led innovation. And that business-led is also an important phrase. We have many members within the IES who are principally academics, although quite a lot of them also do applied work with businesses and with other organisations as well. Collaboration's something I'll talk about at greater length in a minute or two. But you have to think about the funding from Innovate UK as being principally business-led. You can see on the image of the current strategic plan on the slide that it talks about concept to commercialisation, and that's something to bear in mind. It's not only Innovate UK that's really emphasising the idea of capturing benefit and value from our scientific research today, it's actually most organisations that have any level of government funding, and that includes research councils, and we'll come to that again in a minute or two. So Innovate UK, what was the Technology Strategy Board up until about 18 months ago, has a plan. You can download it from the web. You can see the key areas of interest or technological interest that have attracted investment at the moment. They're very similar to what the previous administration called the 8 great technologies. But again, we'll look at specific subject areas in a minute. So what do they do? What do Innovate UK actually do? Well, they, as the slide implies, there are 4 or 5 things that are important. Accelerating that journey from concept to commercialisation, we've already talked about. It's not a straightforward process. We don't very often in scientific innovation certainly start with an idea and progress it very neatly along what used to be called the innovation pipeline, from an idea to a benchtop experiment to a larger scale experiment, and then on to cross something called the valley of death, large scale trials and then full commercialisation. It isn't often like that. It's often much more looking at piloting your way through a web of support mechanisms and processes to get an initial idea from something that's genuinely beneficial to all of us. So the second point then becomes important, connecting the innovation landscape. It's a web. It's a network of relationships between businesses, universities, other kinds of researchers, voluntary agencies, local government, Europe and so on, and private sector funding often. So the Innovate UK is the main government agency that's established to help people develop those strategic relationships and connect that landscape together. The third point that I've got in here is about turning government action into business opportunity. Now, actually in the environmental sciences, this is quite an interesting area. Government buys a lot of things, for example, for hospitals, for local government, for transport and so on. We buy a lot of things, and very often by specifying what's required in more detail, they can stimulate innovation in business. A good example of this would be purchases for hospitals, for example, where if the government or the, in this case, the health trusts, if they specify, for example, a particular kind of lighting which has a very good energy performance and a very high standard of particular light characteristics, the very fact that they've standardised that and that they've issued it as potentially leading to large-scale contracts can stimulate innovation. It can stimulate exploration of ideas and development of new products. So that's government procurement generating business opportunity. Government also regulates. It sets down standards, often EU-driven standards these days, and standardises. And again, those kind of things, particularly when they raise the standard that is required, they raise the quality threshold that's required for products and services, that can stimulate innovation, can stimulate better ways of doing things and new kinds of technologies emerging from that science. So then the fourth thing we've got on the list there is about analysing particular theme areas based on their global potential. Now, Innovate UK is an organisation funded by government, and it provides funding for science that has commercial application. But it does that based on the potential of those products to generate income for the UK or for UK in partnership with other parts of the world. So there has to be global potential. They're not going to invest in something which has a very small return on the investment. I don't want to emphasise the austerity agenda today, but we are not living in times where we have large amounts of money that we can simply throw at particular problems or particular ideas. So there has to be an analysis of the potential, global potential. But that, of course, still leaves plenty of scope for lots of environmental areas. For example, things like water, water shortage, problems associated with water, water quality. Those threats in the water area have been identified as amongst the top international threats to our society. So there's certainly potential for generating a business opportunity and a return on investment from science exploration in there. So, as it says there, building a programme based on data-driven choices based on an analysis of the global potential. And then the last one I won't really spend too much time on. Innovate UK naturally wants to know the impact of what it's doing. Impact's a very important word for universities these days as well, particularly those involved in the research excellence framework. It's all about impact, and that's simply not going to go away, and we need ways of measuring impact. But I think I'd rather use the phrase capturing value from. We need to capture value and measure how much value we are capturing. So Innovate UK continuously tries to improve that, and that's part of its current agenda. Okay, now within that, the knowledge transfer network for which I work is part of the Innovation UK family. We are the people who actually do the engagement, and so that's what I'm doing today. We bring together businesses and entrepreneurs and academics and potential funders to develop these new products and services. Now, what I'm signalling here is that, and I have signalled since I started talking this morning, is that we are about helping businesses to grow. But much of the research comes from the university sector in the UK, and indeed other organisations, sometimes in the voluntary sector. So there is what I'm going to talk about today embraces all of these elements: businesses, entrepreneurs, academics, and funders. So that's what the KTN is the shorthand. That's what the Knowledge Transfer Network does. Ruth was actually a little bit out of date, because although 18 months ago there was indeed an environmental sustainability knowledge transfer network, about 18 months ago all the UK's knowledge transfer networks, we see them here, a whole range, 14 or 15 of them, they were all merged into one very large network. So that network is just now called the Knowledge Transfer Network, and it embraces a very wide range of technologies. The idea with the merger is not to remove the personalised assistance that's provided to particular communities, but to enable different kinds of scientists and technologists to talk to one another. So if you have an idea within a narrower area of environmental science, we should be able to help you find people to talk to in the IT sector, or in agriculture, or in medical technologies, or health-related things, or even in things which are apparently would be much further away, such as aerospace and defence, for example. So there are a number of communities, a number of cross-sector groups, actually much larger than the number shown on here now. 80,000 or so members. We run a lot of events every year with a lot of delegates, and the Knowledge Transfer Network has over 100 specialists that can provide particular advice to you in a university or a business or wherever you are, and we do that all the time, and it's a free government service. Okay, so how do we do this? Well, we do a number of things. I've tried to summarise them as a tabulation here. We provide information and news in one place, and it's up to date. And we'll look at the how you can access that at the end of the webinar. We put out material on our website, news about what's going on, information about what's going on, and also information about funding opportunities that are coming up. And we have a newsletter that again contains this information. We also horizon scan. We look around the sector in particular areas to see what's going on and what kind of things are being developed. Just to give you an idea about that, I recently, last week in fact, was working with the Foreign and Commonwealth Office to identify technologies in the water sector that were emerging from Britain's universities and that could potentially help people working in the developing world or living and working in the developing world, and in particular in South Africa and India. And by horizon scanning across Britain's universities and high-tech companies, we were able to identify a number of people who were working in technologies that were very interesting to these overseas areas, and a number of people have just been told this morning that they've been offered a place on a free funded place on a mission to South Africa to explore those links in more detail. So we're looking at what's going on, scanning the horizon to see what's coming up, what new technologies might be appropriate, and then helping to broker those links. We also broker links not only remotely but also through face-to-face events and activities, so activities about knowledge transfer and collaboration. So if you like, seminars, workshops, expert groups, and similar kinds of activities. They're almost always free. Very often they involve, almost inevitably, they involve people from these different groups, the businesses, the universities, and so on. So we run a program of events and activities. We also offer general and specific advice about finding partners. Many of you will be familiar, I'm sure, with the idea of finding partners for European projects. But similarly, within the UK, there's a lot of emphasis on collaborative research, sharing research across sectors, across people who might previously have been, let's say, a large company and the people in smaller companies who work with them. So sharing ideas across those boundaries between, let's say, companies and people who have previously been their customers, for example, would be another one. So we help people to find the right partners for things, whether it's researchers finding businesses to collaborate or the reverse. And again, we do this both within the UK, within regions, and internationally. And finally, we help people find funding, various sorts of funding, and again, I'm going to pick up on that in a second. Just on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see some statistics just for, as Ruth talked about, the former environmental sustainability KTN. The amount of activity is really quite substantial, and the amount of money that's generated into projects that we've been able to support is also quite substantial. I suspect that the sum that's on there is actually only a small part of what's been assisted, because quite often we don't. Quite often the money that's put into research is commercially sensitive information, so we don't always expect to have it. But something of that order, then hundreds of millions. So there we are. We're part of the UK Innovate UK family. We can help you in specific things, and particularly we're trying to help to promote a climate of, it says on the slide here, open innovation, free and sharing of information. All the research that's been done on effective companies, high growth companies, inventions that are quickly transformed into something useful, suggests that it's partnerships and collaborations that are the most effective way of proceeding. So that's open innovation. Now, I put those as a list, but this is if you like a bit of conceptual stuff here. If you look at this sort of multiple egg diagram, the KTN, we try to make information and data available. That's a very basic thing. And as part of that, we translate research for non-specialist audiences. If you're in a business and you've tried to engage with universities, you may well have had trouble with the language, and the converse is also true. So there is a bit of translation work to explain, often for non-specialists, what is actually being said here, what is the potential of the research, what does it mean in slightly more layman's terms to people who are perhaps interested in funding, for example. So we do some translation. We make partnerships. We actively engage in policy and practice debate. So, for example, earlier this week, as part of a delegation from the Institution of Environmental Sciences, we were talking with the new administration, the Speaker of the House of Commons, MPs, and one or two members of the House of Lords about the importance of science and the importance of generating value from science. So we try and influence the debate. And as it says on the right-hand side there, we are really trying to build capability and enable innovation. So what we're trying to do, what we want to help you with, is a lot more than just giving you information. It's actually helping you to thrive in an environment that is generally more innovative. Okay, now let's get to the bit that probably is the most important. Let's talk a little bit about the money. Now, in a seminar like the one we're in today, there's only a small subsection that we can really talk about, and I'm going to talk about 3 or 4 different sources of finance, but as part of a wider set of possibilities. So, on the screen here, you can see that what are called here the different tools that Innovate UK offers to participants in the UK, or people overseas who have UK partners. You can see the knowledge transfer network there as one of the tools, but I'm going to talk about 3 things in particular today as introduction to the wider set of tools here. I'm going to talk about innovation vouchers, I'm going to talk about smart awards and knowledge transfer partnerships in the middle of the diagram there. But I'll give you some pointers to some other places as well, and there'll be some opportunity to ask some questions. Okay, so let's take innovation vouchers, because these are if you like, the smallest sum. Now, innovation vouchers were set up to help businesses to interact with universities or other external specialists. They are sums of £5,000 available to pay the costs of a business consulting a university. Let's say a university, it could be a private sector research organisation. It's £5,000 just to ease the wheels of making that first contact with a university or another researcher. It's if a business has got let's say a particular challenge, it could be an environmental challenge, wants to know more about what it might do in the way of managing its water, let's say, or managing its carbon emission by doing something clever with maybe the grounds in which it operates. So it's a scheme to help businesses gain new knowledge, to innovate and to grow, or to reduce their costs, in fact, to grow their profits, let's say. So we have £5,000 vouchers. Businesses can approach any one of a number of knowledge suppliers, and I've put some of them on the screen here now. So you'll see universities and, in fact, FE colleges on the list of potential knowledge suppliers, but also private sector organisations, research organisations or technical consultancies, something there called catapult centres. Now we'll just pause on that for a minute. Catapult centres have been in the press quite a lot. They are major national initiatives set up by government to focus industry and academic attention on particular subject areas. There are about 8 or 9 of them set up now. Some of them are geographically focused, others are more dispersed. But for example, there's one on advanced manufacturing, the earliest of them. But equally, there are some on offshore energy, there are ones with medical focus, and so on. So I put the website up there in case you want to have a look in more detail about those. But there are a lot of experts in particular areas within catapult centres. Okay, and intellectual property advisors. Those are people who can help you connect your intellectual property, protect your intellectual property, your IP. So you get these vouchers. The way it works is if you're a small business, up to a medium-sized business, and you need help with something, you can apply. You shouldn't have worked with the knowledge provider before, and you shouldn't have had an innovation voucher from Innovate UK before. But these are very straightforward. In fact, they work on a lottery. I've described it as a lottery. They're very easy to apply for. The lottery is run every 3 months, and the next one is in about a month's time, in July. You apply online, very few questions to ask, and you'll see there that impact word. And remember, the focus of Innovate UK is on the impact of the idea. Once you've filled in the application form, it shouldn't take more than a few minutes. If you pass the threshold for consideration, you'll be entered into the draw, and the winners are chosen at random. They allocate 100 vouchers every round, and if you don't make it the first round, you can enter again. So there's innovation vouchers. Very simple, very straightforward, and a good way of making a first contact between a business and a university. And of course, there is nothing to stop a university stimulating a business that they know are interested in working with them. There's nothing to stop a university suggesting to that business that they apply for an innovation voucher. That's quite acceptable. Okay, so that's innovation vouchers. The second source of funding that I want to talk about is something called knowledge transfer partnerships. And I've chosen to talk about these because they are rather different in their focus. These are focused on principally on the people rather than the money, but the money comes with it. So this is an opportunity funded largely by government for a business to work with a university through the medium of a new graduate and support from a specialist within a university. So the funding covers a new graduate, and it could be a new somebody that's just graduated from a bachelor's degree in environmental science, for example, or it could be somebody who's just finished a PhD. So it's a very broad range of people. A recent graduate will come to work in your company, but they will actually be employed by the university, and they will bring with them half a day a week on average of an academic's time. Now, depending on the size of the business that's involved, the cost that's refunded is up to 2/3. For larger businesses, it's about half. And it can be, if they're fixed term, anything up to 3 years. My own experience is that these work very well at the level of 1 to 2 years. The very short ones, I think, are quite difficult to manage. But they are, let's say, projects of 1 to 3 years in duration, where a particular business opportunity is being researched and explored by a bright young person. And these people, I can assure you, the people who take up these posts are very bright in my experience. The business must have some capacity to support what's called the KTP Associate, the Knowledge Transfer Partnership Associate. That's the young person. And they can be, although it says typically they're businesses, they can be charities or not-for-profit organisations, and they can be public sector research and technology organisations that are involved. So It's not restricted to organisations completely in the private sector, but they must be developing, again, a business opportunity. The application process is a little more demanding than it is for an innovation voucher. Across the country, there are a number of knowledge transfer partnership advisors, and often your local university may have an advisor too, but it may not be that you want to work with your local university. It may be that you think that the person you want to work with, or the university you want to work with, is further from your business. Or conversely, if the university is wanting to work with somebody with a particular business, it's not local to them. So we're looking to identify an academic with appropriate subject expertise, and we, as in the KTN, can help you with that. The KTP advisor, the regional advisor, can help you with advice on how to complete the paperwork, and jointly, if you're successful in being funded, your application goes through, you jointly recruit the associate, the young person. That person's actually employed by the university, although they work entirely within your organisation, your business. So this is not, although the person is employed by the university, this is not, this is definitely a business opportunity. I've flagged up here the distribution, typically, of knowledge transfer partnerships in relation to the academic departments in universities that have been associated with them. And you can see here that traditionally in environmental sciences, only 15% are actually employed by what are broadly called science departments. But actually, environmental science strays across into a number of other sectors here. So certainly the largest proportion of KTPs are coming from engineering departments and then management departments. But I hope you can appreciate that environmental science covers a number of these areas. Now I can speak about knowledge transfer partnerships myself from personal experience, because I was involved as the academic partner in one with which involved my university working with a landscape architecture practice on looking at the aesthetics and the biodiversity of sustainable drainage schemes, and it was very successful. The company developed a lot of materials, a lot of expertise in doing designs to improve the acceptability of sustainable drainage schemes, and a number of those are now being implemented in big building programs that are starting to take off now across the UK. So it was, as well as being rewarding for the company, I have to say, as an academic, I found it a great deal of, I got a great deal of knowledge from it and a great deal of enjoyment as well. It was a very interesting process indeed. So KTP is, again, something else that you can certainly look at as a funding mechanism for a project. And again, they can be instigated by a university, but they have to be led by a business. So the university can stimulate a business to think about applying for one. Third type of funding mechanism that I want to talk about is something called SMART awards, and these are grants that are available for research and development projects. They run, they're awarded on a kind of rolling program. Batches of applications are received every couple of months. There are three types of grant, varying levels, varying scale: proof of market, proof of concept, and proof and development of a prototype. Again, these are for companies, but the company could be a spin out from a university, for example, or it could be a small group of people working themselves on a new startup business or a new initiative. And as you can see, the first level there is proof of market as a smallish grant, and enables you to explore whether there is actually a market for your idea. So these are smart awards. The proof of market one that I mentioned there is up to £25,000, and it funds about 60% of the total project costs. And you can see there what it's intended to do. It's to assess commercial viability in various different ways, including what the position would be about intellectual property. Say, for example, if you were working in a university and you'd been researching something, you'd need to take advice on where the ownership of that intellectual property rested, and the money can be used to pay for that specialist advice and business planning and so on. So that's proof of market. Proof of concept is a bit bigger. It's really a scaling up activity, up to 18 months, £100,000, again up to 60% of the project costs. And you can see there the kind of things that are designed to be done with the money. Prototyping, building something, a first go at building something, or some specialist testing of something, some new idea that you have. And finally, we've got prototype development. So this is large-scale stuff, 2 years, perhaps, maybe £250,000. You get proportionally less of the money as a grant, but you can see that it's designed for things that are a bit further down, a bit further across that web, that complex web of getting a new thing from an environmental science idea to a commercial application. And the people often apply for these in sequence, so they will be exploring a progression from market testing through to actually a small-scale demonstrator. Okay, so those are SMART awards. Now, I can't finish a seminar on funding without touching on some of the other areas of funding that are available. I've just touched on 3 sources of funding that were available from Innovate UK. As I said, there are other sources of funding as well. For example, there's a programme called SBRI. It used to stand for Small Business Research Initiative, but actually it's a programme that can be used by any size of business these days. And more importantly, I think for people in the environmental sciences arenas, there are specialist competitions. To give you an example of the sort of thing that has been going on, over the last 2 years we've had a series of competitions looking at the use of environmental data, things like data that's generated by the Geological Survey or the Ordnance Survey or the Oceanographic Survey, or it could be air quality information or soil information, how that can be used to develop a commercial product. And we've had a series of special competitions where £5, £6, £7 million at a time was being awarded to a number of collaborative bids. So again, these are bids for universities and businesses, and in this case probably knowledge providers, to work together. So it could be, for example, the Ordnance Survey with a university and a company interested in flood modelling, for example, would be one example. Developing a specific product to help people understand and respond to flooding, for example, that would be a good example. So those are specific competitions, and if you join the KTN network, you'll get information about those competitions that are in your sector, relevant to your sector. That will be sent to you as soon as that information becomes available. So that's special competitions. Now, let me say something just very briefly about European funding. The thing we know about European funding is that it has massively grown in importance for UK universities and businesses over the years. We moved through a series of what were called framework programmes. You can see them on here as FP1 and so on. The most recent one was FP7, Framework Programme 7, and we've now moved into new programme, Horizon 2020, where the sums of money are really eye-watering. The money that's been allocated to Horizon 2020 is always for international collaboration. Again, we can help you with this. The UK has the national points of contact for EU competitions and so on. Innovate UK has those on its staff, and we run a series of webinars and face-to-face events and guidance and so on for participants in that. It's worth noting that the UK has been very successful actually with its universities in bidding for European funding, very successful in securing that, where Britain is leading consortia with participants, collaborators from other European countries. But businesses have been a bit less successful, proportionally less successful in securing those funds. So there's plenty of scope there, and the KTN can help to point you in the right direction. I can't possibly go through the number of potential sources because there are a very large number of programs here covering marine applications, agriculturally and biodiversity related applications. Water is very popular, there's lots of money going into water research, things to do with soils, and things to do with the circular economy. Now, circular economy is a phrase that I don't know how familiar it is to most environmental science stakeholders. If you've read, as Ruth mentioned, if you've read the last edition of the IES Journal, you'll have some idea what it's about at least. But we're talking here about ways of developing new products and services that are much less environmentally damaging, that reduce the amount of materials going to waste, that try and reduce energy consumption and so on. And the diagram shows you a few ways in which this is being done. It's been done first of all by recycling, which everybody knows about, but also by remanufacturing goods and services, redistributing materials from one sector to another, and generating things which have a longer life. Now, in environmental sciences, this idea of circularity shouldn't be as unusual as it appears to be in some other sectors of the UK economy. For the manufacturing industry, for example, this is quite a new concept because traditionally they have taken raw materials, turned them into a product, and then at the end of life, that product has been disposed of to landfill. Now, clearly, we can't go on doing that forever. We're going to run out of raw materials and we're going to run out of landfill sites. And actually, in the UK, we're certainly getting close to the latter. We're getting very short of landfill sites. But it's also not a good idea in terms of our energy consumption and our emissions to air and water. So we're trying to move the UK closer to a circular economy, and so is the EU at that pan-European level. So the KTN runs a circular economy community. There have been competitions in this area for technologies and services, many of which are highly relevant and involve environmental scientists. But we also run discussion groups, we publish case studies and so on. We can help people find collaborators. Now this is a more challenging area than you think. It's a very complex new area, and it's we're finding it as a KTN quite a challenge. A lot of other people are working on this area as well, but we are putting funding into this, and so is the EU. So if you're interested in finding out more about how environmental scientists can contribute to this, or finding funding for your research and development that's involved, that you think is involved in this area, whether it's the water sector or air pollution or whatever it might be, waste disposal and looking at the implications of that, for example, or soil contamination, looking at all of those things and how that relates to the circular economy, do contact us and we can help you with that. I've touched on some of the other areas in which the KTN works already. I talked about it as technology. You can probably replace the word there with science, certainly with applied science. But I've flagged up a few things. Sustainability features very large in what we're doing at the moment. Agricultural technologies, novel materials, as we saw in the last journal, things to do with data, and absolutely crucially, and an area where environmental sciences have a really key role, is in the management of carbon and carbon emissions. That's an area where I think there are huge opportunities for environmental sciences to secure funding and really to help both the UK and the world address some of these major issues. And as I said before, we have specialists who can help you with that. Now, little note of caution. With any new technology, there are challenges. And I put this diagram up. It's called the Gartner hype cycle. Not only because I think it's a very interesting way of capturing things, but it's also slightly amusing. What it's trying to do is to capture what happens when somebody says they've invented a new technology or they've got a new scientific idea. Gartner is a US sort of punditry organisation. They analyse new technology in the way it moves from the bench top or the idea in someone's head towards application. And what they do describe that, the pattern there is this up and down trajectory, where you start off with something new, a trigger, you reach a peak of inflated expectations where everybody says, gosh, this is going to sort out everything for us, this is going to be wonderful. Let's say it might have been a few years ago, or 3 or 4 years ago, it might have been carbon capture and storage. That's an interesting one. Yes, this is going to sort out our energy problems. We can carry on using fossil fuel and we'll capture the carbon and carbon dioxide, the carbon, and stick it back in the ground. Well, it's not happened yet. I'm still optimistic that it might happen to a certain extent, but we may be going through the trough of disillusionment a little. But hopefully we'll rise up through the slope of enlightenment and we'll end up with something that's actually productive and functional in the not too distant future. Now that's a theoretical analysis, but what's good about the Gartner group is that every year, around about August time, they publish an analysis of new kinds of technologies and where they think they are in this cycle. Now, this particular diagram was not produced for environmental sciences, but you can see that there are things on here that are relevant to environmental sciences, and I hope if you're thinking about some scientific idea that you've got, you'd be able to position yourself, likely to be somewhere on the left-hand side of this diagram, I suspect, but you'd be able to position yourself and see and think about where it's going to go and how you can get over that hump towards that slope of enlightenment, or the plateau, if you like, at the end. Just to give you an idea, big data and data science are on this diagram, and environmental data, we are reaching the position with things like climate modelling, where we have massive amounts of data, environmental science data, and we are starting to be able to process this in ways which is genuinely rewarding for society, for businesses, and for actually other applications as well. The technology that we use to process the data, climatic data, is leading to other spin-offs as well. But you can start to see that if you were an investor, potential investor in handling big data, you'd be somewhat sceptical about the hype that might have been generated a few months ago or a year or two ago. You'll notice there isn't actually a timescale on the axis here. Gartner suggests that certain technologies progress very quickly, others are much slower. But there's an indication of the time to reach a plateau for some technologies in the symbols on the diagram. So do have a look at that later on and think about it in the context of your own research your own ideas. I think it's a helpful analysis. The other one I'd flag up, which is fun, I think, is the Internet of Things. The idea that everything talks to everything else and tells it where it is and what it should be doing, usually captured as your fridge talking to Tesco. Okay, that's perhaps not the thing to invest in right now. Okay, so finally, what's going on now is big changes in manufacturing, in industry generally. This one's called manufacturing, but it's about circular economies, revolutions, which include economic and social implications, but crucially there on that diagram, environmental implications, and that's really where we can act as environmental scientists. Very, very important, and big opportunities arising from that. I won't spend too long talking about this, but there are various tools, including the Horizons tool, that you can use and we can help you with, the KTN can help you with in developing your idea, and we're very willing to talk to you about that. So, if you were writing a proposal, clearly a number of things you need to talk to us about and talk to yourselves about, which is, if it's a competition, getting your thing in line, your proposal in line with the scope of the competition, building the right consortium, business case, and so on, and telling us what it's about that's going to, and what it is about it that's going to add value and give value for money. So those are important things to do with the proposal. So if you have been, thank you for listening, and I'm very happy to take questions. I think Ruth here at the IES is going to help me with the questions.
Hi, thank you so much, Carolyn. So if you'd like to ask Carolyn a question, you can submit it in the questions box, which is to the right-hand side of your screen, hopefully. But we've had some come through, so if anyone wants to type what's going on. So just on the topic of impact, for Innovate UK, is impact assessed purely financially, or would this include wider environmental impact?
Well, as I said at the beginning of the talk, I think that clearly they are looking for things that are going to generate some income, because those are the things that are going to be sustainable. So it's actually sustainability that's the key thing. And sustainability, as we all know, has three pillars. It has an economic pillar, it has a social pillar, and it has an environmental pillar. And so they're looking for proposals which will hit all three of those objectives. I referred right at the end of my talk to the Horizons tool, and that will give quite a clear steer on how to write a proposal that does demonstrate that it's hitting all of those things. We don't want to be funding, or Innovate UK don't want to be funding things which can't in due course become freestanding, because we can't afford to do it as a society and it wouldn't be sustainable. So keep the word sustainability in mind, as well as the environmental impact.
Okay, great, thank you. So you spoke about partnerships and international potential. Do you help connect UK businesses with foreign research, or is it focused just on UK institutions?
No, we do. We do all permutations of UK and overseas. So the research could be in the UK, and it could be foreign investment or a foreign company. But if it's done in partnership, we will always be looking for some benefit to the UK. It could be a benefit to the UK science base and or UK companies. And to do this, we often work in conjunction with the Foreign and Commonwealth Office and the organisation called UK Trade and Investment. We don't deal with sales, so I will say quite explicitly, we do sometimes get companies approaching us and saying, we've got a great new device, can you help us sell us it in China? We don't do that. We're looking at things which are earlier stage, which are developing, growing, and have big impact, a big potential impact. If it's reached the point where there is a product and you're just looking for sales, you'd have to look to UK Trade and Investment alone to fund or to assist you with that. That's not something we would do.
Okay. And so does Innovate UK have a wider aim to promote sustainability? I'm sorry that I got the name wrong. But, for example, are potential negative environmental impacts of investments in other sectors considered in decision making?
The answer to that is clearly yes. as I said, they have Innovate UK have developed this Horizons tool. I perhaps could even go back to it in the. I don't know whether I can get back to it in the presentation. Let's see. So this is the Horizons tool, and you can see that it's you can get access to this. You can Google it and download it yourself. Very straightforward. You can see that it looks at a whole range of things to do with sustainable futures and its social, environmental, and economic trends. So the risks you mentioned, damage and so on as a potential. You can see the risks there to things like waste production or pollution and ozone and so on are included in that. So yes, Innovate UK are not going to fund things which are not in the long term environmentally sustainable. It raises some quite interesting issues when you look at transition technologies, say for example things like fracking, and I know that's an area that's of interest to a number of IES members and indeed others, because it is still a fossil fuel. However, it is less environmentally damaging than some others. So there are some interesting choices to be made and some grey areas, I think, not unique to Innovate UK in having to deal with those.
Okay. And so when you were talking about the trough of disillusionment, which is great, how can you differentiate between a project which can continue and plateau into productivity and one that is simply not viable? Or would it not get to that stage?
Well, people will need to develop a business case for a project. Now, they may not be, well, they may only be embryonic businesses, but by a business case, we mean an argument as to why this thing is going to be self-sustaining eventually. Now, all businesses, I would agree very much with the Gartner hype cycle in the sense that all operations, when they're progressing from, let's call it the bench top, but it may not be a bench, it might be a field exploration through to some new product or some new service, they all go through difficult phases. They all go through that trough of disillusionment. But we want to make sure they come out of the other side as well. And we want to be realistic about how long that's going to take and what the barriers might be to progressing it. So those have to be explored. And that's why some of these grants that are given include proof of market and proof of concept, as well as, give me some money to develop a large gadget. We want people to explore the implications of what they're doing in sufficient detail.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Carolyn. I think that's all that we have time for. For those of you watching at home, you'll be able to rewatch this webinar even. It's going to be sent out in today's IES newsletter and will be available on the website. And if you do have any further questions, please feel free to contact Carolyn. You can do this via the details she put up or via the IES project office. So thank you so much, and thank you again, Carolyn.
Thank you for inviting me. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.